The first Old Testament. There are many versions of the Bible that each have different amount of books they consider canon. The Latin Vulgate, the King James Version of the Bible, the Greek Orthodoxy, the Geneva Bible of 1560, the Ethiopian Bible, and many more each have different books they consider canon. Previously, we talked a bit about the early Christians and the road to canon. This week we'll go into more depth about the first authoritative book that was used by Christians for nearly 400 years. With the life and sudden death of Jesus, it left the early Christians in disarray. This disarray was made worse with the often violent deaths of Jesus' apostles. Peter, head of the church in Rome, was crucified upside down. Paul, head of the church in Turkey and Greece, was beheaded in Rome. Lastly, James, the brother of Jesus, head of the Church of Jerusalem, was stoned to death by the Pharisees. With the death of the apostles and the three heads of the early church, Christians were disorganized and began to splinter. This was made worse with Christianity being persecuted and put to death, and the sacking of Jerusalem in the Jewish-Roman wars. Despite the persecution and fragmentation of the early church movements, there was a singular text that helped hold the early church together. That text was the Septuagint. To the early Christians, the words canon and established scriptures did not exist. The mere owning of Christian texts at the time could be a crime punishable by death. The written Gospels of the New Testament competed and existed along with hundreds of other documents. However, there was a body of work that the majority of early Christians agreed upon, and that was a text that had been written centuries before the birth of Jesus, and that was known as the Septuagint. The existence of the Septuagint can, in part, be attributed to the conquest of Judea by Alexander the Great. After the death of Alexander, one of his generals, Ptolemy, became pharaoh of Egypt, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty that would last until the death of Cleopatra. It is said that Ptolemy II of Philadelphia desired to have a copy of all the books in the world. The tradition goes that Ptolemy II ordered the royal librarian Demetrius of Palaron to gather all the books in the world. As part of this order, a letter was sent out to the Hebrews. In the tradition, this letter is called the letter of Astersias. It is said that the letter went to the 12 tribes of Israel to send 6 scholars each to transcribe their laws and books into Greek. The 12 tribes answered and sent their representatives to Alexandria to write all their books down. It is important to note that when Alexander the Great had conquered the Jewish peoples around the mid-330s BC, he had made Greek the mandatory and official language of his empire. For the Jewish people who had been under Hellenistic rule for nearly a century, there had been a decreasing amount of people who knew how to speak, nonetheless read, ancient Hebrew. When the 72 representatives had arrived in Alexandria, they were greeted by Pharaoh, given honor, and then secluded in a house as not to have any outside influence to distract them. It is tradition that 72 representatives of the 12 tribes of Israel finished their work in 72 days. The text was said to be led by the Jewish scholar and historian Demetrius. When the work was completed, it was praised, and it is said that a curse was put on those who would try and change the tremendous undertaking of transcribing the works. Later traditions hold that each of the 72 were isolated, and by miracle they each came up with the exact same translation independently, proving its divine will. Regardless on whether the later traditions are true, the results remain the same. For the first time, the ancient books were translated to Greek. This is a significant advancement, since the Greek and later Aramaic translations kept the old Jewish books that would be the Old Testament 700 years in the future alive, and become the authoritative source for both Jews and Christians who could not read ancient Hebrew, which very few people could. With the Septuagint helping cement the ancient Jewish texts and bring new life into these ancient books that was quickly being forgotten. With the Septuagint, a pathway of unity was developed and affected history in profound ways. Have you heard the Septuagint? Did you know of the ancient lineage of the Septuagint? Did the apostles read the Septuagint? Why did the Septuagint fall out of favor in the 4th century AD? Let me know in the comment section below, and for more Supernatural History TV, like and subscribe.